Are the Miami Hurricanes worthy of top 10 consideration in the Associated Press poll? Hi, my name is Brian Smith. I am the publisher of All Hurricanes, and today's topic is going to discuss just that. Miami sits at 4-0. They have a record that is resemblance of a team that's dominating their games, even against their best opponent, Texas A&M. There are reasons to believe they deserve top 10 consideration. But as I get through this podcast, well, the poll isn't quite out yet, and I kind of wanted to do it before. I might do a reaction piece depending on where Miami's ranked. But they were 22nd, then 20 this past week, and prior to that, they weren't ranked at all after a 5-7 season. But I kind of did a breakdown on all Hurricanes that this podcast is going in, and I'm also kind of going to do some comparisons, at least briefly, Georgia, Michigan, and a few other teams, Southern Cal, Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame, Texas. Going to kind of use some different scenarios, what I've seen, what the numbers are, etc., to kind of back up different points in both directions, because Miami is certainly a flawed team as well, and there is no perfect team in college football this year. There's no dominant number one squad. So let's start off with this. I'm just going to kind of go over the things that I went into more detail in the article on All Hurricanes about the positives. I'll get into a little more detail about some of the things I'm concerned about, and we just kind of have to wait on a couple of them, unfortunately, because they deal directly with injuries. Number one, Miami has the ability to make big third down plays. The offensive line's been good. Tyler Van Dyke, the running game gets him in those situations. The offense is vastly improved. I don't think anybody, well, nobody within their right mind would argue that. This is a team, if you really look at it, it's just night and day. Van Dyke being healthy is probably the best thing. And in the article, I just put it under good news, but all of that sets up this, and this is what the Miami that I knew when I was growing up, this is what they had. They had several receivers that could beat you deep, short, whatever, and hurt you. Now, I'm not saying Miami has the best wide receiver in the room, but because of the O-line, the running game, the quarterback, all working together, it opens up more opportunities. Restrepo, George, Young, those three are very, very good. They have other guys like Brashard, Ray, Horton. Most teams would be really fortunate to have them as primary players. I don't think many teams are going to be able to say legitimately that they have a better 1-2-3 punch that is consistently, here's the word, put this in a box for those of you who want to bitch and moan, because you will do it anyway, they are used consistently in every game. Miami is very balanced at wide receiver with their three. Xavier catches the most, but it could be George, it could be Young, it could be Restrepo with the touchdown or touchdowns in a game. Against A&M, Jacoby George had 3 touchdowns. Restrepo caught an early touchdown against Temple. It's very difficult for the opposing team's defensive coordinator to say, okay, we're going to take X away, and then their passing game will falter. You take away one, it's one of the others. And it's not because they're all average. They're all just really good. I don't think any of them's like a top 5 pick or something, but at the college level specifically, they get off, they get separation, they catch the ball, and they get yards after catch. Wide receiver corps, I think that is the biggest difference from last year to this year as a culmination. I mean, this is a big box point. I know this is a lot of moving parts here, but they have advanced the most because of how the offense around them have improved too. Of course, Restrepo is healthy. George is just taking another step forward as a player, and Colby is in his second year, and he has a healthy Van Dyke. This is a great, great situation for Miami. I think that's their biggest bonus. The offense is just so multifaceted, and the wide receiver corps gives it the cherry on top. Of course, Van Dyke, 74 of 99, 74.7%, 1,042 yards. Here's the most important stat from him, and it goes back to those receivers, among others. 10.5 yards per passing attempt. Not completion, attempt. That's really good. 11 touchdowns, only 1 pick, and that was against Miami of Ohio. So he's went 3 games in a row without one. He's number 9 in the nation on that yards per attempt. Parrish in the running back corps, very deep. Obviously, Parrish is a little banged up. We'll see how long that lasts. The run game is just exponentially better. That I don't need to go into that. The corners are getting better. I'll talk about that here in a second on the back end. But James Williams and Kinchins, when they're together, Kinchins is obviously out for a while, really good. Miami hasn't missed anything since Kinchins is gone, but against top-notch competition, they need him back. You're going to hear me say this over and over. Injuries are my concern. They also have the ability to make big plays for different guys. Like Couch had a pick yesterday, or two, I believe it was two. And they just find different ways for somebody to make a play. They're playing within the team scheme. That's good. Now let's talk a little bit about the offensive line real quick. With Lee being out, we don't know how long. That's unfortunate, but they have a week off. Then they have Georgia Tech at home. Then they travel to Chapel Hill to play North Carolina, a pretty good team that can get after the quarterback. They had 9 sacks. Remember this stat for when the game comes up. It's the 14th of October. The Tar Heels had 9 sacks against South Carolina. I do not care who you're playing. That is insane. Miami must get Matt Lee back for that game. That's all I'm going to say about that. Other flaws besides the injury bug, which is the D-line, Matt Lee, just bumps and bruises in general. Obviously, Kinchins is out. We don't know Henry Parrish. This is the biggest reason. If somebody, in my opinion, if I was a voter, and I am not, if you do not want to rank Miami in the top 10, okay, say they're a team that has too many bumps. They have too many guys out. We don't know how they're going to advance. I would actually be okay with that. I've had too many coaches tell me that they base the evaluation of a player, for instance, their number one evaluation. Are you available? Right now, Miami is one of the more beat up teams in the top 20. They just are. You're not going to advance consistently with that. There's no way around it. It is straight up pot luck, but that's the biggest thing. Miami needs to get healthy. That's the biggest flaw they have. And unfortunately, that's not one you can really solve, but it's still their biggest flaw. The other things that I'm a little concerned about, they already had defensive tackle issues, and I am happy with how Leonard Taylor played against Temple. He looked much better, quicker, more involved, getting off blocks. Temple just got bushwhacked anyway up front. I think it was like 15 yards or something like that. I forget what it was. It was bad. Miami just put the hammer down on that game, and it was pretty funny. But Miami did their job in multiple ways up front, and it started with Taylor. The overall, like, keeping the guy in the pocket, making him feel uncomfortable, feet moving, all the little things that led to the picks. Their front did well, but they're still not very deep at defensive tackle with the big body guys. I've said that 500 times on all Hurricanes and on this podcast and others. They need more size, and you can't get it, obviously, in the middle of the season. But they need Moten and some of these other guys to take a step forward. Rushing yards, this is a really bad stat for Temple. Part of it's on them. Temple, 16 carries, 11 yards. That is brutal. That is absolutely terrible. Miami also defensively in that game, just for fun here, this puts things in perspective as well. Tackles for loss. It's the first stat that I generally look at. The Canes only had 6 and still held them to that. Basically, it was just run stuff after run stuff, 2 yards or less when Temple ran the ball. They were terrible. They couldn't do it at all. Davis actually led the Canes in tackles, a corner. He's just been around the ball, man. Got to give him credit. Darryl Porter is another guy that played pretty well. Harris has done a nice job at safety with Kinchins out. But overall, Maligoa and all these guys, they've done a really nice job. KJ Coyd's one of my favorite players to watch. He plays hard. He's in position. The defense is playing good, but they need more help up front. And fortunately, Miami on the edge is very deep, very deep. But they have 5-6 guys that can play. When you count Jaden Lane, they got Reuben Bain in him. And you've got Jafari, Harvey, who would start on the vast majority of teams. Obviously, and Nigel Kelly, Akeem Messidor, who's out. We don't know how long, but that's another one of those injury things I keep bringing up. Very deep front. That gives them a chance against any team. The other part of the defense that I think is underrated is the linebackers. Wesley Bassink and several of those guys don't get enough credit. I just kind of want to mention that in general. As far as the flaws in general, this can go in a lot of directions, but they haven't got home on a lot of sacks, but teams, I think, know, hey, we're not going to block these guys consistently. Quick game, run game, hike, bomb, hike, screen. You're not sacking us. This is the trend across college football. Teams that don't have as much talent, I don't know if it was just some meeting that everybody had, but I mean teams across the board that have pass rushers. Ohio State can't get home. Miami with all their talent, Florida State, etc. These teams are lucky to get 2 or 3 sacks when they're teams that quite honestly have the talent to get 5 and 6 against lesser competition. Teams are just refusing to be sacked, and they would rather just go 3 and out. Like, they will not take the chances. So I'm not as concerned about sack numbers. I look at more TFL because they run more, and you've got to get some TFLs even in the screen game because some of those are behind the line. Miami's pretty good with that, but they are only giving up 48 yards of rushing a game with that D line. So despite some of the size difference, I'll give them credit. That's good. They don't have massive guys, but man, they run to the football. They play with good chemistry. Run fits are good. And quite frankly, that's hard to argue against because the team effort is there. But again, against the elite competition, I'm worried about D-tackle size in terms of depth / experience. And outside of 2 or 3 teams in college football, I would probably say that. And then I'm also worried about one other thing. Does Miami currently possess, and this is based on the first 4 games, a corner that the announcer doesn't really talk about during a game if you're watching a live broadcast or whatever, or a recording? They don't talk about him because the other team's quarterback goes away. And I say no. The teams that have made the college football playoff, this is just statistically factual, like the 2016 group was Clemson, Washington, Bama, Ohio State. All of them had a corner drafted in the first or second round the next spring. I thought Miami would, and they might, but those guys I'm not got drafted went in the first or second round. I'm not sure Miami has somebody like that. And if you get into a playoff situation and you can't just come up and take a guy away, I mean, just flat out, my guy is better than your dude who is going to get drafted, it's hard to win playoff games. So I don't know if they're a top 5 kind of team, but the back end, I think they can at least arguably be that. In addition to that, if Pensions comes back, especially later this year, you put him with Williams, it's easily the best 1-2 punch in the country at safety. That helps erase some of the issues if there are any at corner. I need to watch that a little bit more. The next time I go to a game, I'll be at the Georgia Tech game, but that'll be interesting. The other point with this, Miami still needs to find a way to get more game-changing turnovers like earlier in the game, and I'm being picky. But that's some of it. To compare Miami, the thing that I would like to do is just bring up the 2 obvious teams, and that's Georgia and then Michigan. A couple of things. Georgia's secondary depth is absurd, but I don't know if they've got an elite guy. They got a couple guys that can get drafted. Lassiter, somebody that's talked about quite a bit. So that's one thing they might be better. Quarterback play, I'll take Van Dyke, and that's the most important position. Do they have a true number 1? I don't know. They've got a decent wide receiver corps, but I would take Miami's over it. They only have 5 sacks in 4 games, so they're kind of struggling with the same thing Miami is. Their best running back is back. He missed the first couple games. Edwards, he's doing pretty well since. He's averaging over 90 yards a game since. I think Malachi Starks is one of the best safeties in the country. He's tremendous. Devon Bullard, he's been banged up. He's a kid that can play corner or safety. But their depth is the thing. And, of course, they got a tight end that's uber unique. But are they a million times better than Miami based on like where the rankings are? No. Too many Associated Press poll people rank teams based on what they think in the preseason poll. Don't watch games, fill it out, send it in. It's pathetic. It's been that way for decades. It hasn't really changed. I think Georgia is good, but this, even if they're the best team, this is a flawed college football. The difference between so-and-so number 1 and where Miami's at, somewhere, I think they're somewhere between 7 and 12 right now. That's my opinion. Is not that big a difference. So we'll see, and we'll part of that will be the maturation of Georgia's passing game, your quarterback play as it gets more experience. We'll see. I just don't think they've got a ton of things going on offensively. We'll see. Michigan, real quick, Roman Wilson is the key for them. That's a guy, he's out of Honolulu. It's kind of interesting. He plays for Michigan. He's a Hawaii kid that can really hit the Jets and score. And off play action with their 2 running backs, Edwards, Blake Corum, that's my opinion about as good a 1-2 punch as there is in college football at any position. And then J.J. McCarthy is very accurate for the most part. A couple games ago, he was 22 of 25. 88% works for me too. But do they have an elite edge? Do they have an elite corner? they're just really sound in everything they do. But Michigan is boring as all get out. I can't stand watching them play. And I'm not sure what to think of them because their schedule, like Georgia's, is garbage. It is terrible. So it's hard to grade them. Is Miami a lot different than those two teams? I don't think so. But at the same time, they haven't been on the big stage, but the one time against Texas A&M, and that's debatable. A&M's talent is really good, but they just don't play like it all the time. They have too many mental flaws. Like they'll have a breakdown in the secondary, which were a gazillion, and it gets them killed. So Miami spotted them basically a couple scores and still beat them by 15. What's Miami going to do when they're in a close game against a team that can make consistent throws? The North Carolina game is kind of the barometer next, obviously. And if they struggle against Georgia Tech, that's not a good sign either. But I think Miami can be a top 10 team. They just need another chance to prove it. And if they do go through between now and the end of the Carolina game undefeated, they'll be ranked in the top 10. I think more people want to see it, and I don't expect them to be ranked anywhere freaking near as high as they should be after beating Temple. I'm just going by the eye test and some basic stats. But again, like Van Dyke stats are through the roof. They're giving up 48 yards a game on the ground. That's third in the nation. They held A&M under 100 yards. They found ways to keep Stewart from going off against him. He was a great receiver for A&M. He's going to be a first-round pick when it's his time. He's only a sophomore. Can't turn pro yet. They've done a lot of great things. And after 5-7, I think some people are still looking at the last year's team. Do note, Miami's roster changed by 40 freaking players. 40 for the portal in high school. Not many teams are in that boat. You got to rank them just on this year. And I think a lot of teams are probably in a similar scenario, but Miami is being ranked at least somewhat unfairly right now. And I expect them to be like number 17 or 18, whatever, when the poll comes out, because it's just nobody's doing any research. So in my opinion, Miami deserves top 10 consideration. And at the least, they're about number 12 because they're so balanced. From quarterback, O-line, D-line, linebackers better, secondary is way better. They've improved in a balanced manner, probably as well, if not more than anybody in college football. And then again, it goes back to that first thing I was talking about. That balanced offense sets off the three receivers, Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, and Colby Young. I don't know which one's the number one, the number two, or the number three, because it changes every week. That's a good problem to have because they're all good. It's not because they're average. They're all really good. So I think Miami should get top 10 consideration. I really do. Just a few other notes real quick. SC, I think, is a little bit overrated because their defense is just okay. But Caleb Williams keeps them in any game. Ohio State's good, but their quarterback play makes me a little nervous. Defense can't get home. They struggled with Notre Dame's offensive line, even though they won the game at the end. Notre Dame is the exact same problem. They can't rush for and get home. You're like Miami's O-line, O-line and D-line is as good as either one of those, in my opinion. In key moments, keeping Van Dyke upright, or else his stats wouldn't be where they are. They can compete with those teams, no problem. Texas, I do not trust the mullet. Even though he cut it off, I still call him the mullet. Quinn Ewers can be really good, but he can have mediocre days too. He was 11-21 last week against freaking Wyoming. I don't trust that. Alabama, we have no idea. That's Jekyll and Hyde. That team I won't touch with a 10-foot pole. Outside of that, the one team I'm curious about, and they need to play somebody else that's better, is Penn State. Their defense is legit. Now can Drew Aller, who's only a sophomore, the former 5-star quarterback out of the state of Ohio, can he take that next step, and do they have enough receivers? I still have questions about that. His teams are stacking the box against the really, really talented running backs. Miami, I think, could have some success against them, because if you can't beat Miami over the top, their front seven has a lot of experience and talent. They can compete with them too. I think Penn State's a top 5 team, but I think Miami can compete on a neutral field. That'd be a really good game. So again, Miami competes in different ways with different teams, and you adjust game plans and matchups or matchups. But Miami can compete with any of these teams. Georgia and Michigan are just what I used as a barometer, because they're probably going to be 1-2 in the poll until otherwise noted. Their schedules are garbage. They're really good rosters. They have good coaches. But these people that write in the ballots, I don't trust a lot for the most part, not everybody. Note that Miami is making its way towards being a top 20 team. They just got to keep winning. Everybody have a great day. Thank you very much.